And we are live. Hello and welcome to another episode where Susan and I, incidentally only today, are going to do a learning integration related to Module 3 of the ACE program. Hello, Suzanne. I'm just going to talk 1 second about the copyright before I hand it over to you. Just give me 1 second here. I'm going to do a very quick screen share, if I can find it right here. Thank you. So Susan and I both graduated from the ACE program, ACE being an acronym for the Accelerating Coaching Excellence Program. This particular cohort ran in 2022, and this is run by David Peterson and David Goldsmith. So this was under the auspices of coaching.com, a very interesting course. I just say this because some of these materials are copyrighted, as you see here, to David B. Peterson and 7 Paths Forward. But as graduates, we have permission to use these materials. Again, original copyright goes to the authors. Okay, now I have to find my stop share thing. So I have 3 monitors here, so it's not always that straightforward. Hello, Suzanne. Lovely of you to come today.
Hi, Claudia, and great to be here and continue the review for Module 3 today with the title Start Fast.
Exactly. So what stood out for you? What stood out for you?
So over the last couple of modules, we were introduced to the development pipeline. And the Start Fast is really taking or stripping away some of the, at times, time-consuming chatter and focusing, like laser focusing in on what is important for the client right now and how can I, as a coach, bring value, honoring that we are working with people who don't have much time. So really focusing in. And with that, thanks for showing the pipeline, finding out inside motivation, is it a constraint there? And yeah, crystallizing what's the most important and where can we as coaches bring immediate value?
And I think that you mentioned earlier, yes, sometimes we don't have much time with a client. And true, in some typical business coaching engagements, you might only be given a handful of hours with a coachee, and you have to kind of get to it rather quickly. Sometimes in other cases, you might have a much more longer term, deliberately so, longer term engagement that might run over months and so on. And then you might be seduced into thinking that you can leisurely go along and take all the time that you want. But I really think that even in these longer engagements, it's really important, I think, to capture these original things, even though you will take all the time you need to crystallize it further and to then go deeper, which are subsequent steps. But I think getting kind of to the heart of the matter is important. I remember that as we went through the course, one of the questions that came up in a Q&A session was, so what about an intake interview? Some coaches indeed meet the first time, sometimes for an entire hour or an entire session with a client, and ask a whole bunch of different questions just to get kind of the lay of the land. And it's very often questionnaire based and things like that. And do you remember what they said? It's like, go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's what I was getting at, that building trust and rapport is important. And you can do it various ways. And you can do it through an intake session where you, build rapport, find out what the issues are, background information, where do you work, how big is the company, do you have a team that you supervise, like all those things, to get a picture of what the client is working in. And the ACE approach is you don't need it to be able to work on something, and you can bring right away value, and those background information will reveal itself if it is necessary.
Exactly, because, no matter how much intake you do as a coach, you're never going to really know the whole landscape of your client. But in the end, do you really need to? The client has it all at the ready. And ultimately, to what extent do you need to know all the intricacies in and outs? If it is important, it's going to come up in discussion, and it's going to, like you said, reveal itself at the appropriate moment. If you see that the client is tapping in the dark, you just ask at that moment. And it's because sometimes during these intakes, I have also observed others do some, and there's so much information there that maybe ultimately is never going to get used.
And I think as well, what I want to point out in starting fast does not mean to rush. It's
Right.
still taking the time and crystallizing what is important to the client at this point in time. What do they want to work on? And ask a couple of times, what else? What else? And then what stood out for me as well is the phrase, what do you want to work on? Depending on where you emphasize, either on the you or the work, it rings differently. Hi, Kathy. And might trigger something different for the client, to go to the point, what really matters to them at the moment.
Yeah. Thank you. Hi, Kathy. Lovely to meet you. We just got started, even a few minutes late. So, take your time. We're just talking about start fast. What might it be? What is it not? And here's a summary of a slide also that was in the course. And starting fast means a little bit of this efficiently zooming in on what brings the most value, at this stage. And that might be insight, that might be connection, but the purpose is on that. It's like let's get rid of all the superfluous stuff that might not be needed, and be very, very purposeful at each question that is asked. It is not like they say, they use some lovely phrasing here. It's not pushy. It's not steamrolling your client. Steamrolling, it's kind of nice. It's not reckless. It's actually the exact opposite of being reckless. It's very delicate and principled. So let me stop the share so we actually also see Kathy on the screen. Hi there. Can we continue with this particular thing, or did you want to maybe mention, Kathy, what stood out for you in the whole start fast strategy, let's say? You're on mute.
Just from what I saw on the screen and heard you guys talk about just briefly, because I logged in a little bit late, I think you pretty much covered it for me and what I would be thinking along too. It is purposeful, keeping in mind the client, wants typically needs to have help quickly, and it's getting to the point and not belaboring things. So it's getting to the point that really helps them.
Yeah. We had brought up very briefly the development pipeline before, and I think that one of the things maybe to aim for as well is to get a sense, as efficiently as possible, about where the biggest bottleneck is along this pipeline. Are we mainly dealing with an insight issue, mainly a motivation issue, some real world practice, skills, some accountability, and then we can hone out. And of course, all this is going to be confirmed and double checked and aligned to the client's needs. But I think that there again, this development pipeline can be an interesting tool. The course then actually also went a little bit into signals of when to speed up, when to slow down, and it's rather clear, I think, at least it was for me. If you're just turning in circles or you have long-winded things that are not going anywhere, just try to get it back on task. Anything on that topic from any of you lovely ladies?
Well, and I think sometimes, in the early stages of my coaching, I felt like I needed to have more context in the past about the client's life, and I really don't. If they feel like they need it, then we might have to allow them to share something, but also not to let them sit in the past, because we can't really do anything about the past. We can only move forward.
Also, I think that the past often keeps them in the problem space, meaning very often, the coachee comes not because they want to build this grand vision. Some of them do. That's what general is, not because they want to go after this grand strategic vision and life goals and things like that, but they come because there's something in their here and now or recent past that is maybe not going the way that they would like to. And so talking about the past, talking about the current context keeps them stuck there, rather than looking a little bit more liberally, maybe a little bit more high level on the situation, and then turning around and gently starting to look towards where they would like to be without so many strings attached. Yeah. Suzanne?
Yeah, I think that you captured it, that the coaching engagement is really looking and planning an action for the future. So being stuck and revisiting the past keeps the same thinking patterns, and going right, focusing on and checking, do they have the insight and motivation to change anything, will sort of lead to a path forward in action planning. Is it that more work needs to be done and insight and motivation needs to be uncovered? Or are they very clear, and does it lie in capabilities? Do they need some practice? They have the insight, want to change, but the old patterns are still having a grip of some sort. So just to figuring all that out, you don't need to live in the past. It's really the focus is on change and future action.
Yeah. There's one case where sometimes I do go a little bit into the past, but it's very deliberately to look at what strategies and resources and internal capabilities did they maybe deploy in the past already, successfully or not, but hopefully successfully, in order to overcome similar challenges. It's to kind of remind themselves of their own strategies, of their own strength. I find that also being something that helps with making them more and more resourceful. actually, allow me, please, the indulgence of sharing this one quote that I really liked. And it's by David White. And he says, speed does not come from speed. Speed is a result, an outcome, an ecology of combining factors in a person's approach to work. It is deep attention, well-laid and well-sharpened tools, care, patience, the imagination engaged to bring disparate parts together in one whole. So speed is an outcome. It's a result. And I really like that quote, because if we hear words like care and patience and deep attention, it's not something that is done in a fast, rushed fashion. It's something that requires kind of a moment of stopping. I think that in so many cases, there's like when we drive a car, sometimes we need to know when we can push the accelerator, and sometimes we need to know, when it is time to maybe slow down a little bit. So I really like that quote. Thank you for letting me share that. Mm-hmm. Any insights on that, or?
No, just to highlight, this was sort of a different way of thinking about speed for me as well, in terms of speed is an outcome. And not a tactic. If it's a tactic, then I think you're getting into the rushed part of things. But yeah.
Actually, it was very interesting also that in one of the supported, one of the reading materials they gave in support of this chapter, they talked about, in companies specifically, about strategic speed versus performance speed, or what did they call it? I forget now. But it's essentially like the speed that you rush and try to keep up with the development that you have to bring and the thing. It's this go, 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 go kind of attitude, where speed is speed. But if you only focus on that, there's of course place for effectiveness and performance. I'm not saying, throw it all out, but if that all is all that you focus on, you might become late in terms of strategy. And building strategic speed, meaning being first to market, being the one who kind of figures out the next steps to take and so on, the one that builds a company that can sustain change that's over the horizon in terms of people and culture and cohesion and processes and things like that. That takes kind of this moment to slow down, look at things and build it from the ground up. And so in that case, that particular article mentioned that, yes, you need to kind of slow down to speed up. So speed is not always speed. Speed is sometimes an outcome of slowing down. Yes. Very, very interesting readings.
Yeah, I really like that. I think it's a concept that the business world, at least especially here in the United States, is slowing down to speed up, because we just think productivity is fast, 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 right? But a lot of times when you go just fast, 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 you're not looking at possible other leading indicators. You could be missing things by going too fast and not slowing down to kind of really deeply reflective thinking. And what are the other possibilities? We only go, oh, that's the next possibility. We just got to do. And doing sometimes isn't the best thing. So,
I mean, we can even take it to the extreme where the company tries so hard to catch up to a dwindling market share, or the impact of a new technology, and AI obviously is in everybody's mind right now, but there's so much of this, we need to do more in order to stay on that wave, that sometimes maybe being on the wave is not what they should be doing at all. Right? Maybe time even comes for drastic changes. And unless you stop and take a look and really reflect and be clear about who you are as a company and what you stand for and what you're after and what your core competencies are and your strengths and all that kind of stuff, you're always just going to be trying to play catch up.
Mm-hmm. And I think you hit something there that's part of the coaching and a lot of assessments as well. You have your strength, and every strength overdone can become your weakness. So that's where you need to stop and take the time. Is what we have done and what was successful up to now, if you're doing more forcefully, faster, bring us where we want to be in the future? Or would this push us to the side as a business? And what do we need to change to reach our goals in the future?
Yeah.
Well, and I think this is a great point, because I was in a group with some organizational development folks on Friday, and one of them had actually a patient or a caregiver was on the call too, but she's also part of this group. And she was asking one of the people in the organization, it was a healthcare organization. So I'm taking care of my mother, and we've got an email or some kind of communication saying, would I give feedback? But we had so many different things to give feedback on, I didn't know which one they were asking about. So sometimes when we're going so fast, we miss the opportunity to look at the feedback that might be available to us and take that into consideration, or we miss it just entirely because we don't even have our thought processes looking at what is the feedback that we're getting that can take us to that feed forward place. So I think that is so key. We just go fast and looking, we miss opportunities.
Right, because it's I don't know if you guys or the audience knows about system 1 versus system 2 thinking, right? If we jump into system 1 thinking, which is kind of this fast shortcut, gut level reactionary kind of thinking, then we are going to miss things versus this system 2 thinking, which is much more cognitive, deliberate, slowed down, and I'm sure Suzanne can just explain it much better than I can. But it's sometimes we need to look at this like what you said, Kathy. If you ask for feedback in a way that it can be given, and don't maybe necessarily give too much direction. Because if you give too much direction to your questions, you close off other areas that could provide feedback, and so on. So it's always a tough thing. Did I say it correctly, Suzanne, about system?
Oh, absolutely. And I think it comes back to how we are processing information in our brain, and that we are run by our emotional brain, and the main purpose is keep us safe. And if things are fast and we don't understand why, too much change, no clear expectation, no certainty, it's easier to go into the threat responses. And then with all the fast changes and all the decisions we make, if our prefrontal cortex, it's like a battery, right? It's shrinking over the day. It needs glucose to function. And every decision zaps a bit out of it, and the analytical part. And it monitors our limbic system. So the less capacity you have in your prefrontal cortex, the easier it is to jump into the limbic reactive mode. And my hunch is that we are not taking care enough in replenishing our prefrontal cortex throughout the day. And then we are getting into sort of the loop. The weekend is not long enough to replenish. The vacation is not long enough to replenish. And our world speeds up and we have to process, like we are bombarded with information. And what do we do in the evening? Sitting with our mini computers in the hand and scrolling, which is more input. So when do we take deliberately time to be still and silent and replenish? And this looks different for everybody as well, right? Some like to sit and read a book. Some like to be active and be outside. Some like to be with people to replenish. Some need silence. So it's really knowing yourself and making assessments throughout the day, what you need, and take care of your brain to have both systems available to you.
Very well said, Suzanne. Wonderful. It's always nice to have people who are knowledgeable in these fields here to give us some extra input. Did you want to add something, Kathy?
I think I'm good. Yeah.
Thank you. So the next thing that the course touched on was this concept of toggling. Who would like to say a couple words about toggling while I bring up this slide?
So what I get out of it, the toggling is shifting gears. And as well, for me, it made sense. Disrupting sort of the cycle, if let's say zooming in and zooming out, be very detail oriented, because you do use different parts of the brain for that than if you are thinking strategically. And just the oscillating back and forth allows a broader thinking.
Yes, it's kind of like switching gears. It's doing a little bit of this pattern interrupt by switching gears. Mm-hmm. First, you look at something, let's say, top down, then you look at it bottom up. You like zoom in, zoom out is a very nice way of phrasing it literally, because you look at it from, and they use this beautiful word here, on the dance floor versus from the balcony, right? Mm-hmm. Or like, are you the bee next to the flowers, or are you the eagle surveying the whole thing? You ask different questions and you think at different levels of abstraction when you change this kind of questioning. Sometimes other ones that were here is, you mentioned already, Suzanne, short-term versus long-term, going fast versus going slow. Learning versus unlearning is an interesting one, right? And another one might be deciding versus not deciding, or going for it versus not going for it. Like, don't just look at one way, but also look at the opposite way, and then just illuminate the whole complexity of the issue that you're facing. One visualization or an image that I really like in terms of coaching is you're in a dark room and your problem is in a dark room, and you coach together with your coach. You take this flashlight that only illuminates a little part of the whole scene, but on the other hand, you go around and you illuminate various parts of your context or your situation as you explore the front, the back, the top, the bottom, and so on, until you get a clear picture of what's happening. Because maybe without a coach, you would be only seeing the problem from your perspective, one perspective. So, Kathy, you were nodding. Does that ring a bell?
Yeah, think that when I'm working with clients, I can sometimes picture them sitting at their desk, just like I'm sitting at my desk right now. And when I'm here in my desk or they're at their desk, they're seeing, like what's right here in the space, right? So I'm like, well, what if we took a different vantage point? Let's kind of like pretend that you can float up to the ceiling and look down on your whole office complex or your whole area. What do you notice from that perspective, which is something you didn't notice before, that maybe that's been neglected, or maybe, you put too much attention on that and that's enough on something else? Or what is a different process that could be in the flow of things? So getting that different perspective. And then I think another example of toggling is this concept of polarities. So it's either this way or it's that way, instead of it possibly being a both and, right? Mm-hmm. Or a both, because we can get stuck in, it's got to be this way, well, or this way, and we don't come together. So that's another good example of toggling. So just visually, like you said, the perceptions of where you're at, and then in the thinking process, toggling from different perspectives too. So, yeah.
Oh, you are on mute.
Sorry, still getting over my cold. So an interesting thing does this whole idea of maybe having a sliding scale between the two extremes. And actually, when you're coaching a client in real life, like in your office or on location, let's say, rather than remotely, it's very often a nice idea to visualize a line on the floor and start moving your body along that line and considering looking back or looking down or imagining where this is going to bring you, maybe with floor anchors and things like that. I think that can also get your brain moving in different directions because you kinesthetically associate with different spots. Getting a tool like that, maybe from solution oriented brief coaching and things like that, can sometimes be a very, very nice tool to use. What about you, Suzanne, about polarities? Do you want to add anything to that?
No, I think Kathy explained it well, and I think the toggling is pushing you in polarities to see things differently. And then, as she said, does it need to be either or where is there a win-win?
Yeah.
I could just add that I recently coached a client who I started to see the pattern, and I brought this to her attention, where she was all or nothing thinking. It's, all or nothing. There was no in between. There was no trial experiment, nothing, like that. And so that can be another way that we can get into that polarity thing of it's all or nothing. And it quite often is the solution is somewhere in between, especially when we're collaborating, right? And compromising and things like that, because there's a whole new set of possibilities and solutions in that broader range.
Yeah, very nice. Sometimes it helps to push to the extreme, just to be aware what the effects of an extreme thinking or extreme decisions would be, then just to bring it back down and level it out a little bit and balance it out, so that it is worthwhile. Yeah, I think that Michael Neal actually also in the realm of NLP and so on has come up with a whole bunch of these modalities and these toggling things. There's like whole lists of what you could go for from one end of the spectrum to another. But these are already a good part of it. Incidentally, the first one that this course put on the list was, again, action versus reflection. There we come again to our very known by now action reflection cycle. And I think that is too something how we could toggle. What will you do? What will you learn? What will you do? What will you learn? And so on.
And maybe on that the action cycle is not only doing, but how will you be? How will you show up and what will you learn? So action is something going forward, and it's not always doing, it's sometimes being aware of your being and showing up.
Yeah. It's sometimes what precedes behavior.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah, very, very well said. Thank you, Suzanne, for that insight. Very, very important. Because the next step actually that they touched upon, if you gals remember, was the reflection calendar. The reflection calendar. And here in this particular module, they made a distinction between frequent, rapid, sorry about that, frequent, rapid reflection, just a quick check-ins once a day, maybe for a couple minutes during the week, and you just keep tabs on what's happening. And they contrasted it a little bit with the deep reflection, and the longer the time frame that you reflect upon, the more time you would allot to it, monthly, 3 months, 6 months, and so on. And then, of course, let's not, even though we have a calendar, let's not forget the off-schedule contemplations, like I called it. When the mood strikes, by all means, take out your trusty notebook and go into your ivory tower and just think about things for a little bit. It brings up an interesting point. And when you read things like take a couple minutes, it's crazy how that there's so many people that haven't really sat and thought for any amount of time. Like if you take a person and you ask them, like, think about this for 2 minutes, and you time it, those 2 minutes for some people can seem interminable. They could, like, an eternity, because we have, and I think it's not getting better because of social media and all our, information overload, fast moving world, that we actually are thinking. We always jump into this doing and this solving and this researching and this, instead of just maybe at some point sitting and just thinking about it. What's your experience with that? Kathy, would you go first? You're on mute.
You brought to mind something, sorry about that, that just my husband and I were discussing this weekend. And it's kind of like, okay, we have chores to do, right? So we got to do these chores, but then we're also thinking about what do we want to be doing 2 or 3 years from now, and having a dialogue about that and thinking through the different possibilities and the different things we might feel if we take this approach versus this approach. And sometimes we don't want to do that level of thinking, or we're not practiced at that level of thinking to kind of do that, because we're just, it's good to be in the moment, very present, but sometimes you have to expand the thinking to that place. Oh, well, 3 years from now, or If you made this decision that's going to affect your future versus this decision, what is that going to mean for you if you look back, from that space and things like that? So I think, that reflection can be, a lot of people aren't doing that. They're just doing. But then sometimes there are people who do overthinking, right? They're over analytical on things as well. And then they don't take any action because they're overthinking it and stuff like that. So it was funny, years and years and years ago, I was having discussions with some friends and we were talking about having children. And they're like, well, you'll never be ready to have a child, right? You just got to do it. Because, some of the discussion was, well, I don't know how I'm going to be able to afford to have a child and all that kind of stuff. And this was decades ago. But, and then sometimes you can get so wrapped up in, all the what ifs that you don't, move forward too. So I think it's a process that we just have to be aware of, because awareness to me is huge. If we don't have awareness, then that's the first step, for me, is awareness.
Yeah, and just to tag on to that, I totally agree. And awareness what you need in order to move forward, and that it might be different from somebody else. You might need a lot of certainty, know where you are going, very autonomous in your decisions, and somebody else needs flexibility, and it doesn't matter what it is, but it needs to be fair. So really know, and I think that's where it comes back to the pipeline. What is your motivation and insight? The self-awareness is definitely the foundation for any collaboration. So you are not triggered into the reacting mode, but you can sit, take it in, and then respond.
Just really quick, and you brought up a thought to me. Was I've noticed that sometimes I like to be challenged to take an action, and sometimes don't challenge me because I'll retreat. But if you encourage me, then I'll move forward. So I think, and it's not just black and white. Some people will take an action for fear of missing out, right? FOMO, right? But is that a good reason to be taking that action? For some it is, right? Because otherwise they wouldn't do anything. And so we got to kind of dig deep and not assume that everybody likes to be challenged, or everybody likes to be encouraged, or everybody likes to go fast and all of that. So it's kind of that dance. Yeah.
Well, and another layer, as you said, sometimes you like to be challenged, sometimes not so much. Where are you at? What is your capacity? If you are already zapped after a long day of work and you don't have any capacity, and then you would go home and have a conversation where your husband would challenge you, probably different outcome than on a Sunday morning over coffee. So it comes back to self-awareness.
And, what that Kathy mentioned earlier is experience. It's a skill that not everybody has at the ready. It's a very complex thing to tackle, to do these very detailed, consequence-laden reflections where you kind of figure out directions to take yourself and your life and so on. And that's what coaches are for. Literally, that's what coaches are for. Also, when you because it is such a not difficult, but it requires commitment, it requires work, and our brain, not being our friend, comes up with a million excuses why we shouldn't keep this appointment with ourselves. other things are more important and now might not be the right time, or, you might not be in the mood. And so, after a while, you realize that this thinking that you had good intentions to do just never happens. And so if you then have an appointment with a coach, you're much more likely to keep it and get, the expert human change accompaniment that hopefully can help you make it a reality.
That popped up, the procrastination thing, and my husband and I yesterday morning were like, okay, we wanted to get some things done, right? And we were looking at our list that we had created, and we were talking about, well, what should we do first? And my husband was immediately going to kind of what would be the easiest thing to do. And sometimes the easiest can get good momentum. But there was one particular thing that we had on our list that seemed to always be on our list. We were procrastinating because we mentally were making it the hardest thing to do. And so I said, what if we just did the thing that we've been procrastinating the most on, and we made some progress on it? How good would that feel? And guess what? We did it, and we didn't get the whole project done because it's refinishing some tables, but we were making it, just even the sanding of the tables was going to be a chore for us. And so we got the tables sanded, we even got them primed. And so now the next step would be to paint them. But, it can be, oh yeah, let's just do the easiest because that's easiest. And that's why some of those things that are more challenging, we procrastinate on. But if you tackle those first, oh my God, just the pride that we had, and yeah, we made progress on that finally. So.
Because the more often also you say, oh no, it's too difficult, I don't want to do it, the more you reinforce that message, and the harder and harder it gets to get started. So congratulations, Kathy and Kathy's husband, about setting and priming the tables. Fantastic. And we, none of us are immune. All of us have projects like that, I'm sure, somewhere in the dusty closet. So maybe one thing, we just want to take one more minute. Do you girls remember the 3-word question exercise we did in the practicum? Yeah, Kathy's nodding. Can you maybe explain to the listeners a little bit what it was about, and maybe what if it was a worthwhile exercise for you?
Oh gosh, I might have to do. I remember the exercise, but I'm going to defer to somebody else on explaining it. But I remember it was challenging and impactful. But I'll let somebody else describe it.
So as I remember, the exercise was having a coaching conversation with a coach, coachee, and observer. And the coach was only allowed to ask 3-word question and see where it goes. So it was just experimental, lighthearted, and the focus was on 3-word questions. And it was amazing how deep it went quickly. Without the big recap and words that might muddy the water. It was like a drill that's driving down, not necessarily always in sync, but it got to the point and it moved the client forward. That's what I found the amazing part of it.
Yeah, because it as the coach, you had to be so clear about the question that you were trying to ask, the direction in which you wanted to steer the conversation. It put kind of an artificial, an artificial go slow thing on there, because you had to think about the question and how can I word that into 3 words. And, stuff like what's the goal? What's next? How come? explain it, can you explain, and so on. So it was very, very, very to the point. And it's actually kind of crazy how little a coach needs to say in terms of volume of words. And some, also in my experience, some real world coaching sessions, if I had recorded them in Otter, I'm sure my percentage of my speech would have been very, very low compared to, what the client was able to talk about and figure out. Yeah, very, very interesting exercise, and it made a lot of waves in the ACE community as we were practicing it. And it definitely hit home some things about ask the question, shut up. That's one that's drilled down. Don't offer options when you ask a question, just let the client figure it out. Be concise, be to the point, always be deliberate about the exact question that you're asking. And but like Suzanne said, I think that in a short amount of time, you were able, even with that restriction, to really get to the point. Unbelievably so. Yeah.
I have to jump off. I think we are sort of at the end. If you want to continue, feel free, but yeah, I have to jump off, and thank you.
Thank you, Suzanne.
Fantastic as usual, and I'm looking forward to reviewing module 4.
Thank you, Suzanne.
All right. Good to see you again, Suzanne.
Yeah, bye.
Kathy, I want to thank you, and just want to give you one more opportunity. If you had any other insight or highlights regarding this module to share.
Well, I when you brought up the 3 questions, practice and exercise, I just remember it was, once we got in the flow, it was easier. But to start out, how can you ask a question with only 3 words? It was really, really challenging. But when the mind got opened up to see the different possibilities, that's exactly what we do with our clients, right? Is to open up the different possibilities of what's possible and what can happen when you get that clarity. Because so much our language patterns are in generalities. And when we get more specific, we can have better relationships, better results, all of that and stuff like that. So it doesn't take a lot of words. And even though I'm using a lot of words here.
I'm a talker too, so welcome to the club. Yes. Yeah, and Kathy, if you ever want to run another 3-word question session, let's all do it in one of our upcoming practice sessions. It would be fun to do it again after.
Yeah, that would be. Let's prepare that in advance, because I think you have an agenda for the next few sessions in our review, but maybe down the road that would be a good exercise to do.
Fantastic. Everybody, thank you so much for tuning in. If you like what you heard, just show some love by subscribing to the channel, giving us a like, or jotting down a comment in the comment section. If there's questions that remain, mark it there and somebody will get back to you for sure. Okay, Kathy, thank you so much for coming. I hope I will see you in the next module review, and otherwise see you in a practice session.
Okay, thank you.